Oh, you're on here with my class. Say hi.
Hello, class.
If you
So
can you,
glad to
if it,
be
yes,
with
everyone
my
can hear.
sibling, Silas.
um, so first, just some general information. So can you tell them or tell us just your full maiden name, the year you were born, and then where you were born in Germany?
Okay, my name is Annelore Miller, and my maiden name was Kockort, Kokort, and I was born in Münster, Germany, northwest Germany, and I was 1 year old when Hitler came to power.
Wow. Okay. So what? So that would be 1935 then?
1932.
Oh wow. Okay. So 33. All right. So you were born in Munster, a year when Hitler came into power, and then so real quick, just to get some background on our family, can you tell us about how our family was affected by both World War One and World War Two?
Well, our family, are you talking about all our family or the family that I grew up with?
Well, I mean, I knew we had some. Didn't we have some relatives that did fighting in both World War One and World War Two?
Yes. As a matter of fact, my father fought in World War Two, World War One, and World War Two.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what he did during World War One and World War Two, as far as what his job was, maybe out in the field or in the trenches?
Actually, he was a chef.
Oh, awesome! So,
He
what
was a
was?
chef in Russia. He was in fighting the Russians. But he
Wow.
was in a very safe position being a chef. But we didn't know anything about that at the time. We just knew that he was in Russia.
So he was. So, do you know if he would travel with different divisions throughout Russia as they made their way towards Moscow?
No, absolutely nothing. I know he was in the Ukraine. He showed us photos of the families in the Ukraine who cooked for them. Apparently, it was not a very, at the beginning anyway, it was a very kind of friendly relationship. Yeah. I don't
Wow.
know what happened after that. He never talked about it. Most soldiers don't really talk about what happened to them in the war. Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for telling us about that. So how? So obviously you said you were one when Hitler rose to power. So when you got into I guess what your form of elementary school would be in Germany. How did the Nazi influence affect how school was taught in Germany? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I don't remember so much about school because we kids just played. And it wasn't until we got to be um, joining the Nazi party when we were like getting near the teens, um, or not near the teens, actually before that. It was kind of like Boy Scouts. You could join, but Boy Scouts you could join, but of course the Nazi Party and the Hitler Youth you had to join. As a matter of fact, if you could not show up every week for the lessons, for the Nazi lessons, you needed a permission from your parents and the teacher. I was taking gymnastics, and the gymnastic teacher had a sign of paper, some kind of paper to make sure that I was definitely. I had a good reason not to come to the Nazi class.
So you needed like
It was
almost
not
a
a
like a
yeah.
doctor's
Go
note?
ahead. Yes.
Oh wow, okay. So everyone was forced. So what were the Nazi classes like?
Well, it was all talking mostly about how wonderful we were and how the other countries just didn't know what they were doing and they were lazy and they were just not up to par and we were just the most wonderful nation and the most progressive nation in the world. Yes, that's what they taught us.
Wow.
And especially Jewish people were just not to be associated.
Wow. Yeah, so that's another question I was going to ask was I mean how were there different schools for the Jewish people during that time? I mean, of course, they weren't included in the Hitler Youth or anything like that. So
No.
did you know any Jewish people at the time or have any Jewish friends or anything like that?
Yeah, I was just coming to that because our neighborhood was, I lived in the inner city, and our neighborhood was extremely friendly. A lot of the merchants and store owners were Jewish, and we all got along famously until, of course, the Nazis came in. And from then on, it was just starting to be suspicion all over because there was a newspaper called the Stürmer, and anybody that associated with Jewish people would get their name into this paper. And I remember we had a Jewish doctor, and we could not see him anymore because my grandmother's name was already in the paper of associating with a Jewish doctor. So we had to be very careful about that.
Wow. So why, if Hitler was doing this to the Jews during that time, why do you think the German people supported him with such vigor?
Well, that's because he did the Volkswagen and the Autobahn, and he sent people on vacations, and he gave them all sorts of work. People were without jobs, and he gave them lots of jobs, and everything was picking up finally after the depression, and so everybody felt really hopeful and really believed him that he was going to do a good thing. And then things kind of went sour when he started to, when people became more and more suspicious, and people wouldn't talk about, they had Jewish friends, but they didn't want to admit it anymore because they could have landed them, maybe themselves, in a concentration camps, or definitely would be picked up by the Gestapo. So, we were then suspicion set in, and which was really, really bad, very, very nasty.
So just everybody didn't want to talk around each other because they were afraid somebody would report you to the Nazis if you were possibly like a Jewish sympathizer?
Exactly. And there was a newspaper called Der Stürmer, which listed all the names of people that associated with Jewish people. And we had a doctor that was Jewish, so we couldn't see him anymore. Yeah.
How was the influence of the Gestapo? I mean, were there just like nightly raids? Were their presence known? Them in the brown shirts, was it just like our modern day police presence might be?
Oh no, of course not. They're not the Gestapo in their uniforms. I mean, just looking at them would make everybody frightened. And they could come day or night and ask you questions. We had an apartment in our house that was rented to a young woman who was dating a Jew. And I remember the Gestapo coming and asking my mother how often did she see this Jewish person. And my mother told this person that the Gestapo was there. And thank goodness they were able to go to Italy and then move to London. And I visited them later on, many, many years later, and they were okay, and they got out of the country. But yeah, it was just a very fearful period.
So you said you grew up in a mostly Jewish neighborhood in Munster where you were born. When this suspicion started, did most of the Jews in your neighborhood flee the country at that point, or were they taken before they could get out?
Well, most of the very rich people, Jewish people, you had no problems moving. But a lot of the more poor Jewish people, stayed. They really had no way to leave the country. And so they're probably the ones that ended up in the concentration camps. And talking about concentration camps, I noticed that as the Nazis got more and more successful, they asked the children to kind of ask the children to talk about what their parents talked at home. Did they talk about concentration camps, or did they have Jewish friends, and so forth. So I remember as a child, I would go into a room, and when there was a family gathering, my aunts and my mother and my father, or my father wasn't there, but the conversations would stop because they were afraid that we children would listen to their conversation, which may have been about the Nazis, which were a boo-boo. And so it was odd. It was always really quiet when we entered a room with children.
Well, was that just because you guys would go to the Hitler Youth Nazi camps and they would ask you what your parents had talked about?
Yeah, exactly. They wanted to know what our parents were talking
about. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. How was it like for Rolf and your other siblings growing up? Were they kind of going through the same thing that you were?
Well, my brother is 8 years younger.
Oh, okay.
And he does not quite remember as much as I do. Yes.
So tell us, in 1939, how old would you have been there?
Okay, 1939, that would have been, that was just before the bombing. Well, actually, the bombing didn't start till 1943. 39 was 49 was really the really scary time when we really didn't know what was happening. And also, I remember the Kristallnacht when they burned all the synagogues and all the Jewish stores.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was only 6 years old, but I remember standing in the street with everybody, and kids were asking, "What's going on? Why is the city burning?" Wow. And they said, "Well, there's a fire in town." You know, we were 6 years old. We didn't know what was going on. We were just scared. But yeah, from that time on, it just really started to get pretty scary.
Well, how did when World War II started? I guess you would have been around maybe 8 or 9. How was that? How was the propaganda? I mean, what were the Nazis saying during that time period, just when World War II was just getting started?
Well, that we were victorious. And everybody was losing, and it was, of course, all lies. You couldn't depend on really anything because we didn't know that at the time. We believed it because we were taught. You were taught all the time that we were just winning this because we were so fantastic, you know?
Yeah. So what happened? So a little bit later in the war, it comes around probably like 1942 or 43 when the Allies start coming into Germany from the West.
Well, they didn't come till 1945.
Okay, they didn't get.
The bombing started in 1943.
Okay, so tell it.
First the British bombers, and then the American bombers also.
So tell us about that. How did that affect? I mean, just your daily life in Munster and your family.
Well, what we kids, you know, as a child, you're not really quite sure what's going on. You have never experienced anything like it, but neither could you compare it to anything else, and it wasn't unusual. We just thought this is something that happens everywhere. You know, it wasn't anything unusual. This is what happens when there's a war. But we had our little suitcase usually packed, and when the first siren came on, ooh, like that, we would grab up little suitcases and we marched to the bunker. And in the bunker we sat and we listened to the radio, and we could not hear the planes go over us so much because the bunker was very solid. But when the siren came to announce that the planes had passed over the city and it was safe to leave, that's when we would leave. And of course, when we would leave, we would be so happy to see our houses still standing, and that there were just occasional fires here and there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how was it in 1945 when the Allies actually got to Germany? How was that?
Oh, yeah, that was really, really something. And as a young kid, it seemed really exciting because we were living in the Black Forest at the time, and we had heard that the French troops are going to invade us. The French, the English, Russians, and American all invaded different parts of Germany. And in the Black Forest, we were invaded by the French troops. And the French had Morocco was still a French colony. So we had not only French soldiers, but we also had Moroccan soldiers. And the French were actually very kind, and they brought milk to the families that didn't have milk for their children, and they were very, very nice. But I think I have to talk to you about when we first heard the artillery, just before the French troops came in. We were all sitting in the basement and really scared because all we could hear was the artillery. And when they finally came in, they seemed really quite friendly, and we were not afraid anymore. And of course, the Moroccans were so colorful. They wore these unusual uniforms in the mornings and rode their beautiful horses along the mountain path. And my parents were horrified that we kids would go outside when the Moroccans would come in with their horses to graze on the fields. And we kids were just so curious. We wanted to know who they were like, and so they motioned us to come to them, and we would. And ever since that time in the mornings, our kids would all run down to the fields where they grazed their horses, and they brought us bread and chocolate and things we haven't seen in quite a while. So that was actually pretty exciting.
So when the Moroccans came in with the French, would that have been the first time? Well, I guess, yeah, the first time any of you had seen an African American?
Well, my hometown was the university town, and there were some people studying from Africa. So we hadn't seen them, but the Moroccans were very colorful. They had these turbans on, and they had these red capes, and on these beautiful horses. They looked just so exotic. We were really excited.
Wow. Yeah, so when you say you lived in the Black Forest, were you guys living in houses? Like, was it a colony? Had you moved to the Black Forest? I mean, tell me more about that situation.
Well, we had, usually my aunt had some relatives that lived there. So when the bombing got really bad, we just went down south. Yeah.
Because that was more safer than being in a big city like Munster?
Yes, exactly. And also, the children, I also was evacuated for a few months to leave the city. And I stayed with some farmers in the mountains of Bavaria when I was, I guess, 10, maybe 10.
Wow.
And that was kind of scary to get away from home and not knowing where you would be sent.
So
but that was okay. That was okay.
Did you? So after the war is over, and they split Germany up into the 5 different districts. What district were you in? Do you remember?
Yes, we came home on a coal train, on a freight train, and we had to change places several times into different trains. It was quite a long ride, and we were probably pitch black when we got back to Münster, which had been destroyed for Münster is the city I lived in before, and it was 60% bombed out, so there wasn't very much left, and we moved into this apartment. My grandmother had stayed at home, and our apartment was okay. Our bathroom was partly ripped out, and the stairway was ripped out. But we kind of hung some sheets so we could have some privacy in the bathroom. And yeah, it all kind of, we all worked together, yeah.
Well, so Munster and where you guys would have been after the war was in West Germany, which was controlled by the Allies. And then East Germany would have been controlled by the Soviet Union. Did you have any relatives in East Germany at the time?
I did not, but I heard very many stories about the Russian soldiers doing a lot of damage and raping women and being really, really quite destructive.
in East
But that's
Germany.
all, that's what people told us.
Hmm. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, did you have any stories you wanted to share with the class? Any just interesting, crazy stories you might have that we didn't touch on already?
Oh, yeah. The Moroccans were really enthralled with us children. They thought we were really nice. Or maybe we reminded them of their own children. But we told them that the farmers around there in the Black Forest didn't want to share their food with us. And so, because we came from the north, there was kind of a split between the south and the north. And so one night they said, okay, you all come with big bags tonight, and we will raid a potato field. And we hadn't seen potatoes in a long, long time. And so we all came with bags as soon as it got a little dark. And these Moroccan soldiers with bayonets on their shoulder and rifles and bayonets on their shoulders would say, okay, now go for the potatoes. And we would all dig around and we just had sacks full of potatoes. And I thought that was such a lovely story. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, of course, we went back to Münster, my hometown, which is a university city, and there was not, as I said, 60% bombing. It wasn't that the whole city was destroyed. And after the war, all kids that were about 14 or 15 years old had to work as either mothers, helpers, or do some kind of useful job in hotels or wherever there were people needed to work. So that was kind of interesting because we all got thrown on into situations that were totally unfamiliar to us. I was sent to a North Sea island where I worked in a little hotel, but I was 14 then, and it was interesting. I mean, for a young person, it seemed like a new life at that time.
So after this will be the last question. I appreciate everything. My class appreciates it as well. But just looking back on it now, because I know there's a lot of stigmas, and it's really something you don't bring up in Germany. How do German people look back on it now?
Oh, they're pretty disgusted, especially the younger people now. They're pretty disgusted, and they're asking, how come you didn't do something? How come you didn't speak up? But the point was, you spoke up, or your father spoke up, and he never came home from work. And your teacher spoke up, and he was never seen again. And it was just fear.
Wow.
Fear that ruled everything.
Wow. Yeah, that's
it's very hard to describe that feeling,
No, yeah, I understand completely. Well, no, I don't understand at all, actually, because I've never felt anything like that before.
Yes, I know.
Well, one of my students just asked a really good question. So when did you meet Leon, my grandfather? And then when did you guys actually make the move over to America?
Okay, I had gone to school before. I was in kind of fashion design and sewing, pattern making, that sort of thing. But then, of course, it was all interrupted, and I worked in a restaurant. And in the restaurant, I met a lot of students from America, not from England and America were there. And so I met Leon, my future husband, there. But I wasn't really too excited about getting into a relationship at that point. But then we went to a ball. It's called an artist ball, and everybody had to be dressed up. It was like a carnival. What do you call it here? Fasching, Ash Wednesday. Before Ash Wednesday, everybody dresses up. And I was dressed up as an American Indian, and he was dressed up as a cowboy. And so we really got to meet each other a little bit better. And of course, we got to meet each other a little bit more better. And then we got married. We got married in Germany, but then moved to California where Leon was born. Yeah.
Wow. So he was studying at Munster, did you say?
He was studying philosophy in Munster, yeah, at the university, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. So you guys actually, didn't we visit the church where you and him were married in Germany?
Yes, indeed. Yes, we did.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, we did. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I just learned that in 2004, Münster, which is the capital of Westphalia, if you ever see Volkswagen van with has Westphalia on the back, that's from my home county. But anyway, when we were, I lost my thread here. What came next? Wait a minute. We moved to California, and of course, Leon was still a student then at Berkeley. At Berkeley in California.
Mm-hmm.
He was a student assistant at the University of Berkeley. So we lived there for about 3 years and then moved to Sacramento, California, where he started to teach philosophy.
Do you remember exactly what year it was when you guys moved to America, to California?
Oh, yeah, it was 1959.
1959. Wow.
Yeah, that's when Uncle Mark was born in 1961.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
That was coming from Nazi Germany to Berkeley in the 60s. Can you imagine that?
No, I can't.
It was like future shock. It was unbelievable because things were just so different. I thought I landed in heaven. People running on with flowers in their hair and, love. And I thought, my God, where have I landed here?
Well, that's awesome, Oma. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll talk again later in the week. I'll make sure to thank you again. But I know my students appreciate it. And yeah, if you ever think of anything else, just give me a holler and I'll make sure the message gets relayed.
And I just wanted to say to your class how absolutely ignorant and disinterested I was when I was young about history. And now I'm just glued to everything that talks about history. And I wish I could take a history class, any kind of history class. So stick with it.
I'll make sure to relay that message to them.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Oma. I love you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Love you too, Silas. Hope to see you soon.
Yes, ma'am. Have a great day.
And you do too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you go. That was it.
Aww.
Like,
cute. Y'all have the exact same laugh.
That's
yeah.
That was the cutest thing ever.
But yeah, she's awesome. But yeah, like I didn't know that. I knew my great grandfather was a Nazi, but I didn't know he was a cook. I didn't know he was in Operation Barbarossa because he was in Ukraine and Russia. I mean, I'll definitely get that transcribed, but I mean, that's just, when you look at the stuff your history books said, and this is why it's so great, that's like a primary source, right? A primary source is something that directly comes from the mouth. So she could have said something that disagreed, like that U.S. history book you would have opened at Greer or your AP history book or whatever. I would take her word over whatever that history book said 100 times.
Me too.
And then she was like, at the end there, why didn't anybody stand up? She was like, well, if you did, your dad wouldn't come back home. Or like the doctor was gone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just absolutely insane, but just awesome to hear. I'm really glad she did that. I was kind of, I think a few years ago she wouldn't have been willing to talk about that, but I think she's kind of come around. She's trying to tell her story a little bit more. But yeah, what did you guys think? Was it worth it?
Yes.
Yeah, I recorded it through Google Meet, so hopefully I'll be able to share it with some other people. And I tried to record it on my phone. I should have got a freaking tape recorder and just recorded it. I'm gonna listen to it on here and then transcribe it onto paper. But yeah, any questions or anything like that? Comments, concerns? Because that's pretty much all I got for you today. I mean, I can't say anything that's gonna top any of that. But yeah, if you want to look up what Munster was, look up bombed out Munster. Like that's where she lived. That's where I visited. You can see when they were originally bombed out, and then they have the dates on when they originally like rebuilt the buildings. I also didn't know the Native American and cowboy story. That was crazy to me. I thought my grandfather was in the Navy. I thought he was stationed over there, and that's when they met, and he brought him back. No, he was studying philosophy in a long-lost country that was war-torn, and then they dressed up as cowboys and Indians and fell in love. Yeah, so I didn't know that one either. But, yeah, besides that, but yeah, so if you guys don't have anything, I'm good for today.
Jenkins.
Yeah.
My mom says that my grandma has pictures of her dad when her grandfather from when he lived in Germany, like before they moved to South America to get out of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna try to see if I can get those pictures from her to send.
Yeah. So if you ever do actually go back to Greer High School, come stop by my room because I have pictures of her in Germany, the German wedding, my Nazi grandfather. Yeah, I have a bunch of stuff I need to bring. But yeah, we'll definitely bring those in or share them with me. I'll get them around. But yeah, the more the merrier.
Yes, I was going over it.
All right, anything else? Good.
Good.
All right, thank you all. Hey, next week will be Cold War. We'll talk about. We'll touch on.
How many weeks do we have?
Don't we have only 2 more weeks of school?
Yes, but Cold War is one I definitely want to cover. So next Thursday we will do like probably the last online lecture, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thanks, leaving.
We have 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that for a fact either.
Bye, Faye.
We have this week and then 2 more weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
Pam.
I think it's open.
Why is it so fast? How do I end the call?
We have been at home.
All right, we'll see you guys. Thank you for signing on. Hope it was worth it.
Bye.
Stay safe.